with you to get.
You are listening to IBGR. Man, are you a lucky person if you're listening to IBGR. What does that stand for? International Business Growth Radio. And then network, we added to that. We're in 176 countries. No, 178. My mistake. So that's the I. The BG of IBGR. That stands for business growth. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What do we talk about? How to start, grow, or exit a business. R stands for radio. And basically, we are a radio station. We just happen to use the internet as a broadcast tower. And so all our shows are either live broadcast with somebody who is a business owner. There's only business owners on here, entrepreneurs talking to entrepreneurs, or you can look at it as a live stream podcast. So if you listen to this podcast, thank you so much for joining us. This is a place to be. You need to check out the website, ibgr.network, because there's more information here than I could cover if I had the remainder of the day to talk about it. But let's get on to the show that we're doing. This is segment 4, or podcast 4, in the series that goes with today's show. And this is around spotting BS. I am not going to define BS. You know what BS is. It's bull, and then there are bumper stickers that says blank happens. Okay, you got it. All right, so that's what we're talking about. And my goal here is most business owners around the world, my experience around the world is that they have not been well educated, nor have they taken the time to educate themselves on economics. So they don't have the ability to spot absolute insanity when it's spouted by a talking head on television or radio or by a politician. And now, the only way you can survive, because you see, I'm a small business owner like you are. In fact, my latest company is the one you're listening to. I don't have any impact on what goes on in the economy. I don't have any impact on the stupidity of the decisions that our political leaders make or the bureaucrats make. I have no control over that. It happens. But as an entrepreneur, what am I good at? I can tell you what I'm damn good at, just like you. I can react to it and I can beat them. In fact, one of the things I learned years ago is that any good entrepreneur can beat any bureaucrat any day in the week, because if they were any good, they would be on our side of the table, not on theirs. They got a little bit annoyed when you say that, but let that one go. So what have we been doing? This is the 4th podcast. So the first one, you need to listen to it, and that talks about the dangers of government intervention in the economy, and we used the pandemic to take a look at examples of good government versus bad government. The second one is was kind of an homage to Adam Smith. And simply, he's the father of economics because he's the first person that we know of in recorded history to take a systematic approach to look at economics. But he looked at it from a social psychology perspective in that he did it by understanding people. And his first book was The Theory of Moral Sentiments before he wrote his second book, which gave him all his street cred. And that was The Wealth of Nations in 1776. Interesting, coincides with the American Revolution, even though those two things have nothing to do with each other. All right, so, and then in the last segment, the podcast 3 that we just finished up, that one we talked about a market-based economy, the 3 types of economies that you can see out there. There are plenty, but the 3 basic ones are market, command, and mixed. And now here in this podcast, I'm going to take command economy and mix. So what you need to do is when you get to the website, ibgr.network, you go over resources, mouse over that. You'll see show notes. Open that up. Go to Neo World Biz Econ Show 1. Open that thing up. And if it's not there on that page, do a search on it. Let's go down to segment 4, okay? And the best way I could define this, because I've always been looking for, kind of catchy ways of doing it. You're trying to do a little marketing. And that is command-based economy is the belief in the sword. In other words, the only way to get people to do the right thing, according to these individuals, because that's a different story about what is the right thing, rather than letting people decide for themselves, I'm going to tell you because I'm just smarter than you. And if you don't do it, I have the sword, which is a command economy. Mixed economy, on the other hand, is the velvet fist, is that it looks like it's really nice, but in reality, it may not cut your arm off, but it hurts like hell just the same. All right, so command economies. Central government makes all of the economic decisions, and it's usually supply-based and price. and price is based on cost plus. So let me explain what I mean by this. In a market-based economy, the key function is demand. What people want to buy. That will then determine what the price is based upon how plentiful or how scarce the supply is. All right, let me say that again. In a market-based economy, everything's based on demand. You want something, okay? So now how much of it is out there, and how much is out there, and how easy or difficult is it to get what you need, will then determine what the price is going to be. In a command economy, totally different. You see, in a command economy, basically, supply and price are determined by the government. The government has made a decision that this is what we believe people want to buy. The old Soviet Union was a great example of a command economy. You could go to their store. It was called GUM. It stands for something in Russian. But if you were in Moscow and you were privileged, you could go in the GUM store. But even in that store, which was their Nordstrom's or their Macy's or their Saks Fifth Avenue, the shelves were bare except for a couple areas, and they were oversupplied. Why? Because the state decided what it was going to make, that this is what you wanted, and then on top of it, they determined what the price is. And typically, the price was cost plus. And so that actually made it more expensive because there was no pressure on keeping the price lower. All right. Now, a command economy is good at removing inequities in the system. Okay, and they do that, okay, by leveling people down. A command economy does not raise people up. The poor, the people who are on the wrong end of the equity scale, are not raised up. What we do is we take away from the people who have more and we bring them down, with the exception of the government. If you were in the Soviet Union in the 70s and 80s, a couple of years before the collapse, and you were a major player in the Communist Party, you lived like a millionaire in the United States. You had access to everything. You didn't have to pay for anything. You had access to everything. You did have some money in your pocket, but fundamentally is you could go anywhere and you could do anything within reason. Compared to the average peasant in Russia, you looked like a billionaire to them. And so the government kept those privileges because the market wouldn't support them. All right? So they're good at that. But what they're not really good at is then raising people up. They lower people down. Creative destruction or even continuous improvement is impossible. Let me say that again. Creative destruction or continuous improvement is impossible. And the reason for it is monopolies can't heal themselves. In other words, if you have a monopoly, you're the only player, why would you get better? You don't have to. You see, in a market economy, number one is that it's almost impossible to have a monopoly in a market economy unless you're allowed to have one. If you're thinking about the present tech situation in the United States with Google, Facebook, Twitter, et al., all that crew, understand that monopoly status has basically been granted to them by the federal government in the United States. It would be a different situation if they started and had to compete in an open market. It really would be. And now they're protected. In the United States, you have Rule 230 that basically protects them from any type of lawsuit for things that they do. Like they decide they don't like you, you're not on the air. And you could say, well, it's a private company. But if they're the only way you can get on the air, then have they moved from a market-based organization to a monopoly? So they have. So monopolies can't heal themselves. That's why government, continuous improvement in government, or creative destruction is when you say, oh, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do something brand new. Governments don't do that. All right? So that is the downside of command economies, is that some group of people, small group of people who think they're smarter than you will decide what you want and what you should pay for it, and that's what they're going to put out. That's what's going to be produced. And if you can afford it and you want it, okay. But the track record on that is not very, very good. China under Deng Xiaoping changed all of that in the 1970s. Of course, now what China is not is a communist country anymore, though it still has a lot of those aspects to it, or a socialist country. It's actually fascist. All right, now, mixed economies. Mixed economies basically represent less hubris. In other words, here's where you've got people going, I am smarter than the market, but I'm not that smart that I can run anything. You see, in a socialist or a communist economic system, a command economy, is that the people who run it are convinced that they're smarter than you and they can make those decisions better than you can make them. And they can run them better. Of course, they can't. Now, in a mixed economy, which is a fascist system. Now, don't get into the politics of it. I'm not talking about autocratic. I'm not talking about concentration camps or any of that other stuff. What I'm talking about here is state corporatism. That is a technical definition for fascism, where it is a marriage between large corporations, business, and the government. And it's not healthy. It is not as bad as socialism, communism, but trust me, it is not a healthy situation, especially if you're a small business because you're totally pushed out. So in a mixed economy, you have kind of the same dynamics. And the point that I raised, I don't know which podcast it was in today, but it's in one of them, is that it was the last one. One of the dangers of a mixed economy is that once you start down that road, you're only heading in one direction. You're only going to head more and more to a command economy. Look at what's happened in the pandemic, and here's where I'll close, is that governments have consolidated their power, and they're far more powerful today than they were 2 years ago. And how did they do that? They used fear and dependence. I mean, look what we're doing with the vaccination requirement. Now, I'm not going to get into whether that's right or wrong, but they're using fear, basically saying, hey, if you don't get it, here's what's going to happen. Now, not fear of whether you get the disease, but fear whether I'm going to lock your backside up. And so that is your basics in economics. Now, where are we going to go next week in the next 4 podcasts? I'm going to now tell you all the things you need to know about looking at the business cycle. So it has, the cycle has 4 parts. There are a couple inflection points. If you know that, then we're going to take it from there. And all of the remaining shows are going to say, if you're here, here's what you do. And the idea, and we'll close with it, is that you don't need to outrun the bear. You just need to outrun all the other hunters and let the bear get them. And in this case, the bear is the economy, and the other hunters are your competitors. If you know what's going on and you can predict it, you don't control it, but if you see what's coming, you know how to act, and you're going to get through this quite well. And we'll be talking about a couple other concepts like anti-fragile and a few others that I really love. So with that, you listen to IBGR, the International Business Growth Radio Network. My name is William Eastman. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. And please check out all our podcasts. We got lots of good stuff.